I don't know if you can see my screen. Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you so much. Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So today, my colleague and I are going to talk to you about a short investigation about some communicative activities to enhance oral production in the E-level classroom. It is really necessary to take into consideration that this article, it is a kind of review. For this reason, we have carried out a deep bibliographical research. Okay, so now let's move on to the next slide. And here you have something. Now, I would like to explain you a little bit more about this kind of communicative activities that we have. Those activities are based on CLT, that it is communicative language teaching. So as you know, communicative language teaching is mainly focused on the development of the communicative competence. For instance, it is quite necessary that learners develop their linguistic, sociolinguistic, discourse, and strategic competence. Besides, it is quite necessary that in the language learning process, students develop their, for instance, their receptive and productive skills. For this reason, over here, an option of CLT is communicative activities. So over here, we have the main purpose of communicative activities, that it is to enhance language competence development. As I already told you, students have the opportunity in order to develop their communicative competence. In the same way, over here, as you know, those communicative activities are mainly focused on encourage our learners in order to use the language for real purposes, okay? And as you can see, here you have a short definition about this. Communicative activities allow learners to use the language in authentic communication. So let me show you a short list. For our research, we have taken into consideration some communicative activities. Those activities are the most useful when carrying out in the E-level classroom, especially when you want to boost the use of speaking. So the first one, as you can see, here you have the role play, picture description. Number 3, we have information gap, sharing personal experience, and debates. Okay, so now let's start with the role play. Over here, we have the first activity. This is the first communicative activity that we are going to talk about. And I'm pretty sure that you have carried out this activity in your classes. As you know, this is so common, but in the same way, this is so useful in order to encourage our students to use the language. So, as you can see, sorry, role play is a strategy that builds learners' confidence and motivation to interact with others. So, from my personal experience, I have noticed that the role play motivates a lot of students, because in this way, by means of the role play, students can interact with their classmates in the same way they have the chance in order to create their context, and maybe in the same way to use vocabulary, or maybe any kind of language that they can use in real situations, okay, over here. And in the same way, as you can see, here you have another one interesting, that it creates real context or scenarios in which it is necessary to communicate effectively. As you know, when learning a foreign language, it is quite necessary that our students become communicative competent. It means that they are able in order to communicate effectively in real context. So it means that it is not necessary to use the language only in the academic context. It is quite necessary that they use the language outside of the academic context. So it means in real environments. Now, the second one, as you can see, we have selected over here, we have picture description. In this case, this is another communicative activity that you can carry out in the EVL classes in order to boost speaking skill. Nevertheless, it is quite necessary to take into consideration that it is important to consider the goals of your class. So if you want to enhance our learners in order to use a language in an oral way, those activities are great. So the picture description, as you can see, here you have that it consists of producing language to describe visual material. Another advantage from this from this activity is that the students can use the vocabulary, new vocabulary that they acquire in the classes. In the same way, you students have the opportunity to use some grammatical structures and something like this. And this is a great communicative activity in order to enhance oral production in the same way. Now we're going to move on to the next one, that it is information gap. So now, regarding to information gap, this is very interesting because in this case, students become more motivated because in this way, students can interact with their classmates, share ideas, comments, suggestions, etc. And they can contribute in order to accomplish common goals. Okay, so they have the chance in order to participate actively in the E-level classroom. So by means of the information gap, students become an active character in the E-level classroom. So it is quite important for them. And over here, we have another one that it is sharing personal experiences that, as you can see here, you have that it allows learners to share their insight about the moral dilemma that could be presented to them. So in this case, in the same way, students have to talk about different topics. They have the chance in order to share personal opinions, experiences about any topic. And in the same way, this is a great activity that allows learners in order to participate in the E-level classroom, in order to share more with their classmates and something like this. Okay, so now my colleague is going to continue with another communicative activity.
Good afternoon, everyone. Let's start with debates. Talking about debates as a communicative activity, it promotes an enjoyable learning environment among learners due to the fact they keep them active and involved in the activity while they are providing their opinions on the topic being discussed. So as you know, when we are working with the students with debates in our classes, students have to present some comments, some arguments regarding the topic that is being discussed. So depending on what the other students say, they are going to use different kind of vocabulary. They are going to use language that is going to be unconsciously used. And of course, it's going to promote learning, meaningful learning of the students. Debates also allow students to develop critical thinking skills because they have the chance to not only foster the language, but also to think about some possibilities to answer to their classmates' opinions. Let's continue to the next communicative activity. The next communicative activity is problem solving. This activity involves students working on an activity in order to find a solution. So the teacher does, what the teacher does is to present students with an activity, with a topic that requires finding a solution, something that they have to solve. So this activity involves two essential processes. The first one, as in debates, it involves the use of developing critical thinking skills, and it facilitates language use. Consequently, because we are giving students a problem, it becomes an opportunity for them to practice speaking due to the fact it will provide students with the chance to think about ideas, to make suggestions, to analyze the issues to be solved. This is a very useful communicative activity because it can involve students working in real life situations, and they can work cooperatively with their classmates in order to find a solution for the problem that they have to work with. Let's continue with the next activity. Regarding oral production, as we all know, oral production is closely connected to speaking. Speaking is considered as a productive skill that allows learners to be able to interact with people around them. We can express our opinions, we can express our feelings and thoughts. Speaking provides students with opportunities not only for communicating, but for exchanging information. When learning a foreign language, speaking, as we all know, plays a crucial role because it is a fundamental part of learners' language proficiency, and it helps them to negotiate meaning with the ones around them. Aside from that, speaking nowadays is considered as one of the most difficult skills to be enhanced inside the language classroom. That is why it is important as teachers to find out some activities that could help them improve their oral production. So in this regard, communicative activities are very helpful for boosting speaking skill or students' oral production. Let's move on to the speaking soft skills. There are some aspects that are part of speaking, and the first one is production, grammar, vocabulary, fluency, and intonation. Regarding pronunciation, it is an essential component of speaking development. It's the ability that learners have to utter a word appropriately. Pronunciation involves learners producing intelligible messages by taking into consideration many factors in the production. For example, the person is going to bear in mind how to pronounce appropriately, how to use the correct stress, the rhythm, the intonation. That is also very important over here. Regarding the next sub-skill that we have over here, that it is grammar. As we all know, grammar is also an important component in language teaching. It is known, grammar is considered as the structured organization of words in language when we produce utterances. So grammar plays an important role when working with language because it will help us organize our ideas in a coherent way. The next sub-skill that we have over here, it is vocabulary. Vocabulary is another important component of language learning. When someone wants to express something, it is necessary to have at least a basic knowledge of words. So regarding vocabulary, it is very important for the students to have knowledge of at least basic words so they can express themselves and they can share what they want to communicate. The next sub-skill, it is fluency. Fluency is a sub-skill that requires the students to use the language smoothly and without any kind of rehearsal. When a person is fluent, maybe he or she may have already developed his or her communicative competence. So fluency is very important in speaking because it allows us to communicate in an appropriate way. Regarding the last sub-skill, it is intonation. So talking about intonation as a speaking sub-skill, it is considered as an important factor in speaking. It refers to the changes of pitch people make in their speech when communicating a message or interacting with the ones who surround them. So as you can see, all the sub-skills that we have over here help learners and help, of course, every one of us to use the language appropriately, to develop the oral production. So let's move on to the next slide. And let's talk about the methodology that was used in this research. This research was mainly focused on the qualitative approach because it was developed a descriptive documentary research through an extensive bibliographical literature review about communicative activities and oral production. So what we did over here is first, once we identified the problem that was going to be analyzed, in this case, that was going to be described, the bibliographic method was utilized by searching the information using various search equations, such as communicative activities and
Active su micrófono, por favor.
Sorry, I think there was something with my internet. So let me continue. Talking about the research and how we organize the articles that were used for this research. There were numerous articles that we used for this research. They were organized depending on the level of importance, because we focused on using all the communicative activities. We focus on analyzing how each of the communicative activities that were presented in today's class how they impact, how they improve the oral production of the students. So then we selected 47 scientific articles, and after an extensive review of the primary and secondary sources, this information was organized in the state of the art. So over here in the state of the art, we described the main information that could be used for English teachers in order to identify which are the main advantages of each of the activities over there. So let's move on to the next task, to the next activity, that is results and discussion. So regarding the results, what we found in this research, it's results from previous studies demonstrates that communicative activities enhance the development of the oral production of students in the English foreign language classroom. The use of communicative activities as the ones that were already mentioned at the very beginning, as role play, picture describing, information gap, sharing personal experiences, debates, and problem solving definitely contributes to developing the communicative competence of learners, because each of the activities that were selected for this scientific article were focused on helping students or making students use the language as in real life, because that is the purpose of English teachers when teaching this language, not just use the language inside the class, but outside of it. Moreover, these activities get students engaged in using language when communicating among them. To perform this kind of activities, this kind of communicative activities, students need to use the language to carry out them. So all of the time, students are communicating to each other by using English, and then, of course, consequently, their speaking skill is enhanced. Most of the communicative activities, as it was previously stated, are based on real life situation. So students not only practice communicating for the task, but for daily life issues. Most of the scientific articles that were used as a basis for this research show a positive impact on a student's performance. To be more specific, it shows a big impact on students' oral production. For instance, let's mention some examples of these communicative activities and how they enhance the students' oral production. For instance, information gap activities are considered as an effective communicative activity when developing learners' ability to communicate, because when working with this kind of activity, students have a purpose, and the purpose of this activity is to fill the gap, to look for some information that the other student knows. So then, in order to achieve this outcome, students need to communicate, they need to talk to each other. They have to use the language for asking questions, for exchanging ideas. The same thing shows with role plays. So the papers that we used regarding role plays, they show that the students, after working with this kind of activities inside the classroom, they are able to use the language in real life situations. For instance, you can ask students to create a role play about asking for personal information or ordering in a restaurant. So then it's not just focusing on grammar patterns as some traditional methods work on. Now, when these kind of activities, we can help the students improve their speaking skill. Furthermore, communicative activities provide benefits in the language classroom. They are effective strategies when developing learners' autonomy while speaking in English, because they provide students with opportunities to use the language spontaneously. In addition, they can negotiate meaning, they promote fluency, and it boosts students' motivation. Because when students get involved in what we are doing, then learning is going to become meaningful. Let's move on to the next slide. And let's talk about conclusions. So talking about like the main conclusion of this research, it's that speaking is considered one of the most predominant skills in language teaching. It is considered as a productive skill in which students can use to communicate to each other. In this regard, researchers have carried out various studies to identify which methods, which strategies, and techniques will help students develop their ability to communicate. So then, communicative approach as like the umbrella of communicative activities, it develops students' autonomy when using the language. It helps students develop their communicative skills. So in this regard, communicative activities such as role play, picture describing, information gap, sharing personal experiences, debates, and problem solving have become an essential tool when boosting students' oral production. It is also worth to mention that communicative activities offer to language learners lots of benefits. For instance, it makes students get engaged in using the language because all of the activities have a purpose for the students when using it. Consequently, there's a high impact on the ability to use the language fluently. Students are going to improve the way they communicate with each other. Furthermore, communicative activities increase learners' motivation and facilitates language use as in real life. However, it is worth mentioning to remark that this research project provides a general overview of what communicative activities are and how they can be implemented in the foreign language classroom. And of course, it is worth mentioning too that several pedagogical implications need to be considered when implementing communicative activities in the classroom. So it is recommended to continue working on researching on how communicative activities impact the speaking skills of students and how they can contribute to develop their oral production. Because if we as teachers select the best communicative activities, I'm pretty sure we will help students improve their ability to communicate. So let's move on to the next slide. Thank you so much. If there are any questions, we are happy to answer your questions.